Welcome to the selfgrowth.com show. My name is David Riklan, and I'm the founder of selfgrowth.com. Today, we'll be discussing how to speak with confidence and sound better. To help us understand this topic, I'm excited to interview Lynda Stucky. Make sure to listen closely. We're going to be sharing a lot of information today. Before we get started, I want to take a couple of minutes and share some information about Lynda. Lynda Stucky helps leaders maximize their potential through their speech, language, and voice skills so that they stand out from the crowd, skyrocket in their career, and get people to listen and respect them. She's president of Clearly Speaking and a certified licensed speech language pathologist. She provides online courses and coaching to reduce foreign and regional accents and master speech and voice branding alignment. She has over 30 years of experience developing communication skills for individuals in a variety of settings. She's the author of Voice Branding for Executives, How to Align Your Speech, Language, and Voice Skills with Your Professional Goals. Lynda's also created a powerful free communication skills and confidence quiz for you. And I want everybody to jot this down. Definitely worth taking this after the interview, but I want to give you a website to go to. And the website's her main website. It's www.clearly-speaking.com. So it's www.clearly-speaking.com. Jot it down. Make sure you take the quiz later, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. Lynda, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, David. Glad to be here.
All right. I'm excited about this. It's a good topic. I love this topic. I know the value of speaking and the ability to speak. And the title of today's interview is How to Speak with Confidence and Sound Better. So why is it so important to speak with confidence?
Well, one of the things that I get the most from people who come to me, they say, I just don't have any confidence to speak. And they know that if they were to have more confidence, they would be much more influential. They would have more credibility. It would be more polish. There would be more trustworthiness and likability, all from the fact that they are speaking with confidence. So that is those are some of the biggest reasons that you want to speak with confidence. Certainly the influence is huge.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the one that jumps out at me, especially for anybody in business, but also for, for personal relationships. We want people to listen to us and respect us, and that kind of goes hand in hand.
I agree.
So one of the things I know you talk about is a concept called voice branding.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you mean? What exactly is voice branding?
So voice branding is a distinctive sound that each one of us has. And it is made up of characteristics of speech, language, and voice. And the combination of these characteristics, or your characteristics, for example, create your own unique sound. Most likely, let me just give you an example. Most likely, you could pick somebody out from a crowd just based on the way that they sound.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you were to call somebody, or somebody were to call you, you'd say hello. They'd maybe say just a few words. And within seconds, you would know who you're talking to.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a voice brand. It's very much like a fingerprint. Each of us have one of those. But unlike a fingerprint, you can make changes to the way that you sound so that you come across in a way that you want to sound. And that sound should convey whatever is important to you. Hopefully it's confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I frequently ask people, how do you want to come to the table? And they might say, well, I want to come to the table with lots of self-confidence.
Right.
And then I'll ask them, well, what does that sound like? And then that leads us into, well, do you sound like that? I mean, are you aligned? Are you sounding in that way?
All right. You've almost answered part of this, but I want to delve a little bit more deeply. For professionals, why is it important for professionals to think about the way they sound, or even more important in many cases?
Well, I think for professionals, it's so important to sound like the way that you'd like to and convey your values. Because if you want to sell your ideas or your products or your services, believe it or not, your voice is going to either attract or detract you from potential audiences or buyers or clients. as an example, I had a client once who was very sarcastic, and that's of course a vocal tone. And he wasn't able to influence others on his team because he actually confused his listeners with that sarcasm. People didn't know if he was joking or if he was telling the truth, and that was really confusing. So that's just one example. One more example I'll give you is a client I had who had a very shrill, high-pitched voice, and it just
Mhm.
didn't project. And the reason why it was that way was because she was doing a lot more public speaking as she grew into her job, and it terrified her. It almost immobilized her, and yet so that self-confidence was not there, and she was not breathing correctly. She was nervous. She was talking really quickly. Her high-pitched voice was not coming
Mhm.
across, and so she didn't sound confident at all and wasn't credible. So our sound, I guess, our sound conveys impressions, and people
Mhm.
will make quick snap judgments based on the perceptions that we have,
Right.
or that they have of, based on their filters, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's, I guess, the best way to say it.
It's interesting because I pay attention to sounds, and there's some people clearly that have extremely distinct voices. One that comes to mind, James Earl Jones.
Oh, yes.
You know,
Everybody likes that voice.
everybody loves that voice, and there's something about the resonance, and it's just whatever it is, it's soothing. Even when he was like Darth Vader,
Uh-huh.
it's a voice that just exudes, confidence. I guess exudes real confidence. So one of the questions I have for you in terms of the voice, I know the value and the importance of it, and you work with a lot of clients. Is there a particular complaint that you hear from clients most of the time about how their voice sounds? Something that you hear more frequently than other things?
Yeah, well, they don't like the way that they sound when they hear themselves on a recording. That's I hear that all of the time. And, unfortunately, that is their voice because,
Sure.
when you're hearing yourself on a recording, you're actually hearing it from the outside of your head, whereas when you are actually speaking, you're hearing it. It gets amplified
Mhm.
inside. It bounces. The sound bounces off the bony structures of your face and your bones, and so it just sounds differently. But the one that is, when you hear yourself on a tape recording or a recording, it is the actual way that you actually sound. And many people say, well, I didn't realize I sound like that. Or they maybe realize and they say, I didn't know I could do anything about it. And the first thing I say, you can absolutely change the way you sound if you want to. Um, and they'll also say that their voice is affecting their self-confidence because
Sure.
they don't like it. They are going out and, or they're avoiding situations, for example, because they just don't like the way they sound.
I have a memory, very early memory of hearing my voice recorded. Maybe I was 8 or 10 years old, and I was like, "Is that me? Is that how I sound?" But you don't realize when you hear the recording, it's how you sound. You say it's your real voice, but it's how you sound to everybody, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody hears that. So it's important to understand.
That's
So one of the things I want to jump into, I know there are areas of speech and language and voice that are problematic for a lot of people.
right.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to spend some time really focusing on those and have you step through some of the main areas. Before I do, I just want to give out one more time. I mentioned the quiz, so we'll get to these areas in a second. Can you just take 1 minute and talk a little bit about the quiz, and let's give out your website one more time.
Sure. My website is clearly-speaking.com. And on my first page, I have a quiz. And that quiz is all about just doing a check of yourself to determine whether or not your voice and the way that you sound is affecting your own self-confidence.
Right.
And so people can take that quiz, see how many areas it might potentially be affecting areas of life,
Mhm.
and then finding out what you can do about it if you are lacking in self-confidence because of your voice.
Okay, sounds good. So let's jump in.
Mhm.
I know there are these multiple areas that really are problematic. Can you step us through some of the bigger areas and bigger issues?
Yes. So common ones that I work with are I'll name five.
Okay.
Just any distraction. any distraction that takes away from your message. So if you have some distraction, like a word filler, if you use lots of word fillers like or you know what I mean, or right, or things like that, any of those any distraction is going to take your listener away from your message. And once that person is no longer listening to you, you are no longer credible because they have turned you off. They are listening to your distractions. So I work a lot with distractions like up talk, which is an upward inflection that people sometimes use when they are making statements. And I'm doing it right now just to demonstrate. Can you hear it?
Yes, it's not a question. So
Yes.
it puts a question in people's heads when you go up. The natural belief is that there's a question, but you want to make a statement. I get it.
Right. And the perception of that often is that the person isn't very sure of themselves, just like what you just said. Another distraction is glottal fry. Very common. You'll hear that. And that's sort of this sound where it just, that gravelly kind of vocal quality. And a perception that people have of that is that the person is underwhelmed, maybe not very, or too relaxed, almost to the point of being too relaxed.
Right.
So those are a few of distractions that sometimes need to be removed in order to be a more polished, confident speaker. Another one were you going to say something?
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Another one is just the wrong pitch. And this goes back to an example I gave earlier where, particularly with women, we already have a higher pitched voice, but if we get nervous, then our pitch even increases more just because of the way we're breathing and the tension in our vocal cords. It just automatically increases our pitch to be more shrill, sometimes very thin, and it doesn't project well. And of course, the impression or the perception around that is that a person isn't confident either just because they can't project their voice. They sound quiet. Then a third one is rate. So many people want to work on their rate of speech. It is just it's usually too fast. And again, if you think about the perceptions you have of somebody who speaks too quickly, it can come across as being too businesslike. They don't have time for me. They're intense. And so that doesn't project the confidence that they wish to have. A fourth one is difficult to understand because somebody either mumbles, their diction is not very, very good. They have a foreign accent that's hard to understand, a heavy foreign accent, difficult to understand because they're not loud enough. And again, if somebody has to frequently ask you to repeat because you're difficult to understand, after that, your listener will tune into that for so long or do that for so long that after a while it gets really hard. The listener becomes weary a little bit and actually begins to avoid people who are not easy to understand. And then the fifth one that I'll talk about is conciseness. And just being able to speak concisely, crafting messages that are succinct and to the point. And this is probably one area that I work on more than any with the executives whom I coach, because they are moving into a new role and they discover as they get higher and higher that they need to speak more concisely because the people, their stakeholders that are around them are not interested in all the details. They want the big picture kind of thing. So I work a lot with conciseness.
All right. So let's just reiterate over here. So distraction, you mentioned, wrong pitch, rate, too fast, and maybe sometimes too slow, difficult to understand, and conciseness.
Yes.
And those are the five.
Those are the primary ones. Yes.
What's interesting to me is I pay attention to these types of things and I'm well aware of the impact. And it's gotten so bad for me that sometimes I'm listening to someone speak and I'm in the audience and I'm literally sitting down with a piece of paper, and I might do this with the person next to me if they notice as well. And we're marking off every time they say, And we have a checklist. And I've also done this. One of my pet peeves is the word like. A lot of people under the age of 25, it's a common phrase that they use. They stick in like. We've all heard it countless times.
Yes.
I'm sitting here checking off how many likes and we're keeping track of it. So whenever there's something that's going to distract you from what someone's saying, you're going to miss their message.
Absolutely. Right.
It
And
makes
that takes
total sense.
it takes your credibility completely down because they're no longer listening to you. I've done the same, by the way, David. I have counted ums too. And it's because it's such a distraction, and it really influences the flow, like the rhythm of speech is completely changed if there are so many ums or so many knows in the conversation. It's hard to follow, and so you start counting. I've done the same.
I'm not perfect myself. I have my own idiosyncrasies in terms of my speech. I have a few go-to phrases that I use when I need filler. So I completely understand it, but I also understand the value of it. And
Mhm,
sometimes you don't get it until you sit back and you listen to
mhm.
yourself speaking over a period of time.
So true.
You can listen to yourself for 15 seconds and there's immediately some things you'll pick up about the sound. But in terms of things that are these distractions, if you listen to yourself talk for 10, 15 minutes, you really pick up the patterns that you see.
So true, so true. And to your point, we all have areas. So sometimes I discover that we can change something about our speech, but then there's something else that comes up. So all of us have our unique little idiosyncrasies that we do, and it doesn't have to be just in the fillers. It could be some other thing that we do that
Mhm.
is distracting or doesn't convey what we'd like to convey.
All right. Tell me what happens because you work with people, helping them make changes, developing these new skills of speaking. When someone makes a change or develops a new skill, which changes the way they sound, how does this help them? What do you see changing? What
Ah,
happens?
yeah, so many things. I always ask my clients at the end of our training program, what is it that you've gotten out of this? And every one of them will say, I feel so much more confident. So it definitely increases confidence. But that's not the only thing. It could be that they will also get a promotion. They'll be noticed for
Right.
a promotion. And they'll get other increased opportunities. Maybe this leader will get in front of stakeholders a lot
Mhm.
more than they used to. It makes a better first impression. That's another one that is important because
Sure.
sometimes we get used to the way somebody speaks, but then you go in front of somebody new and you need to have this polished look and
Mhm.
self-confident, and it's not there, but this helps with that as well.
What do you find happens if someone doesn't change the way they sound? Well, what's the impact of that?
Oh, it's a real career stopper. It is because as a leader rises in the organization, their communications skills change,
Mhm.
and the current communication style that they have may no longer work in this new higher position. And so it can be a career stopper. And I've heard that sometimes, somebody will hire me with the intention of, if this doesn't change, it could be that this person's not going to, although they're been identified as a high performer, it
Mhm.
could be stopping them from moving to the next level.
All right. We probably covered this already, but I wanted to reiterate it. If you
Okay.
had to characterize a communication problem and its effect on people, what's the most common problem? What do you see the most common issue?
It's the decrease in self-confidence. People will avoid a situation. They will avoid public speaking.
Mhm.
Again, it's going to derail their ability to influence or have an impact in their organization. It will hold people back, basically.
That makes sense. And one of the things I see, it's not just public speaking for a lot of people, it's all speaking. Sometimes even one-on-one, if you don't have the confidence to speak up, or you're in a group of three or more,
Mhm.
the person with the most confidence, and frequently ties back to how they feel about how they sound, is the one that's more likely to have more influence in the conversation in general. And
I
I,
agree.
I
I
see that
agree.
all the time.
And that might not even be the smartest person. It might be
Right.
just the person who is speaking with the most confidence. And
Yes.
also, to your point, I'm glad you brought this up. It's not just having a presentation for a big group, a group of 100 or larger. Just as you said, it's one-on-one as well. So we always have an audience. If we're speaking to each other, you're my audience. And the way I come across to you is important, just as important as if I were speaking to a large organization or a
Sure.
small team of people. If you have an audience, the way, in thinking about being very intentional about the way you want to come to the table is so important.
That makes total sense.
Mhm.
I know that as a business, you primarily work with people. You work with people on speaking and clearly speaking. Can you share some information of how you work with people, what kind of products or service you provide? How should people get in touch with you?
Sure. So I have a number of ways. So I do executive coaching, which is one-on-one, and I go into corporations and I work with executive leaders who are climbing the corporate ladder, who are identified as people who have a lot of potential, but
Mhm.
they have a few things that are holding them back. So I might come in, might be me who is coming in and helping them with their communication skills. So that's one. But I also was getting lots of calls from people who were individuals, business owners, entrepreneurs, public speakers, coaches who wanted to improve their own skills.
Mhm.
They usually are paying by themselves, of course, and so I created some online courses that deal with all of these communication issues. And I have a membership site. It's pretty new, and I am looking for people to join in that as well as an option. It includes group coaching. It includes my book, lots of videos, lessons, and then of course getting together. Oh, it also includes some one-on-one time with me, a short period of time, just once, but that's also included in there. So that's something to also look at. And of course, I have my book. That's also something that people can purchase as a way to become aware of the potential
Mhm.
that our communication has on other people, both positive and negative. So that's also that's a good starting point as well, which can be gotten off of Amazon.
All right. And most of this stuff, if not all of it, can be found on your website, including the quiz.
That's
And
right.
just to give that out one more time for folks, it's www.clearly-speaking.com.
That's correct.
Easy to find. You can jump right in. I highly recommend at least taking a couple of minutes after this, go through the quiz. It's going to open your eyes and really get you thinking about what your issues are
Mhm.
relative to speech and how you sound.
Yeah.
Before we finish up, I just wanted to check any final words for our audience on anything. We covered a lot of material today, give them a lot of great ideas.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing. Any final words for our audience before we finish up?
Yeah. So what I'd like to say about what I do, because I think this sets me apart a little bit, is help people identify what's important to them as opposed to trying to be something else.
Mhm.
And helping people understand that first is understanding who you are and what's important to you and how you want to come to the table, and then making sure that you sound like that so that it's all you and it's authentic, and it's not about me telling what you should be. It's much more about how you can align those two together to be the leader that you want to be. And to me, that's really important. And that's what, thank you for letting me say that.
All right, thank you. I like that concept. We all want to be authentic in terms of
Mhm.
who we are and what we do, but there's
Absolutely.
always ways to portray ourselves and be the best, our best view of ourselves.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, Lynda, thank you for sharing today. A lot of information. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I enjoyed this a lot.
You're welcome. And thanks. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And I want to thank everybody for listening. And I wish everybody great success in all areas of your life. We'll talk to everybody soon.